Well, thank you very much, Tim. It's really an honor for me to be here today at the Clinton School. I saw the list of folks that have spoken here before, and I assure you, I'm way at the bottom of that list. There are some quite distinguished people. Although my colleague from Pennsylvania, Tim Murphy, Dr. Tim Murphy, was here, so I figured I'm in good company at the bottom of the list. It's really good to be here again. It is an honor. I thank the university and the school for having me, inviting me, and thanks to my good friend and colleague, Tim Griffin, for inviting me. Tim is, as mentioned, on the Ways and Means Committee, and I serve on the steering committee. That's the body in the House that votes on who gets to be on the committees. And I can tell you that Tim is, not only is he smart, hardworking, he's charming too, as everybody knows, but he's relentless. And when he was running for that position on Ways and Means, it's an internal campaign. Every time I turn around, there would be Tim. Hey, Shuster, can you support me on this? And so I did, because I know that he's one of those guys. He's smart, he's hardworking, as I said. He's also one of those people in our conference that when he stands up to speak, he has something that's important to say. And a lot of the times, it's about how we need to pull together to get things done. Because sometimes in our conference, there's 240 so of us, and it's like herding cats, but Tim's a voice of reason, Tim's a voice of encouragement, and he's really been a great member for the folks here in the 2nd District of Arkansas, and for the state of Arkansas, and for our nation. So Tim, I appreciate all you do. You're on Ways and Means now, so you can slow down with me a little bit. Until it comes time to figure out how do we fund these different modes of transportation that we have to fund. So again, being here at the Clinton School is great for me. As mentioned, my family goes back public service. My father served in the House. He was the chairman of the Transportation Committee, and the special link that he has to President Clinton was that they passed T-21 in 1998. President signed it. And so President Clinton understood the importance of infrastructure, worked with my father with the Republican majority. And in fact, my father told me a story as he was traveling around the country trying to pitch his idea on the transportation bill. He went to the governor of Kentucky was a Democrat, and the governor said to him, I don't know, President Clinton might not be for it. And he said, well, you talk to him and see if you can be in support of this bill. So the governor went to President Clinton, and he reported back to my father, and President Clinton told the governor of Kentucky, said, Schuster's never going to pass that transportation bill. Sure, you can be for it, you can be strongly for it. So 18 months later, President Clinton signed the bill into law. Again, Schuster's and Clinton have a relationship. I've met the president a couple of times, and it's amazing to me how he can recall. He would recall details of negotiating with my father and dealing with my father. So again, it's great to be here, especially President Clinton and his speeches would talk about his pledge to build a bridge to the 21st century. So here today I am talking literally about building bridges. So again, I'm in good company. 3 things I really want to talk about today is the federal role of transportation, the importance of transportation to the economy in our nation, and my philosophy as the chairman and what we have on the agenda for the committee to move forward. And first, I like to start off all my speeches when I talk to people, especially when I talk to my colleagues, is the fact that there is a role for the federal government in the transportation system. The federal government is not to do it all. It needs to be in partnership with the state and local governments. But to build a national transportation system requires the national government to have a role. And throughout our history, it has. And in fact, the reason we have the Constitution that we have today, I believe, in big part, is due to transportation issues. The Articles of Confederation had a number of problems with it. But really the tipping point or the breaking point with the Articles of Confederation is when Virginia and Maryland, Virginia led by George Washington, tried to negotiate a treaty to navigate the Potomac River and to build a system of canals and portage roads to get over the Allegheny Mountains in western Pennsylvania to go into the Ohio Territory, which is rich in resources. So they came together, they negotiated, and they failed. And when they left those negotiations in Annapolis, the final negotiation, they realized that the Articles of Confederation aren't enough for us to build a nation, to build commerce, to connect this country physically by a transportation system. So they went back to the drawing board, and they came up with the Constitution that we know today. And while they were debating these issues, one of the great philosophers that all the Founding Fathers leaned on and learned from was Adam Smith and his Wealth of Nations, the invisible hand of the market. But one of the things that he also said that our founding fathers latched onto was that the government should do three things for the people. It should provide them with security, preserve justice, and erect and maintain infrastructure to promote commerce. And so those are the three things. When you look at the Article 1, Section 8, it talks about commerce, defense of the nation, and establishing post roads. So our founding fathers understood that, and that's why I believe they produced the Constitution. Then as you move forward in our history, the major infrastructure that was that the federal government supported, encouraged, and legislated on. The first being the National Road, which I'm proud to say goes right through my district, from Baltimore, Maryland, all the way out to Illinois. And we just celebrated the 200-year anniversary of the National Road going through my part of the district. Actually wasn't completed until all the way to Illinois until the late teens, 1818 or 1819, something like that. But that National Road was important, and it was under the Jefferson administration, it was authorized, and under the Madison administration, it was appropriated for, and so they began to build the road. And again, once opening up the West, it was key to national trade. It was key to expanding our trade and stimulating settlement in the West. In fact, when you look at the road as it was after it was being built, from 1920 to 1940, Indiana's population quadrupled. And many came on the National Road to settle in Indiana. Town building was stimulated. In 1827, Indianapolis was the only town between Centerville and Terre Haute, which is 125 miles. But during that 8-year period, there were 9 towns that were established along there. So we started to populate the West, and villages and towns started to grow. In addition, it helped with our infrastructure has always helped in our industrial strength and building our industrial base. From 1820, the economy expanded consistently, and the returns were remarkable for the long-term bull market that it created with, again, towns growing up, industries being started, and commerce being able to flow back and forth because of the National Road. And that growth, again, allowed raw materials to get to the industrial sites, to be able to manufacture, and of course, goods to be getting back to the marketplace so people could buy them. And in addition to the National Road, you had the invention of the steamboat, which helped up and down the rivers, not only moving commerce, but people, building thousands of canals that we built, and of course the railroads really changed the face of the United States. And when railroads started in about the 1840s or so, but really the Transcontinental Railroad is what transformed this nation. And it was started, I like to remind folks, in the middle of the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln realized that if we were going to become a great nation, we had to connect the coasts, and the railroads were the way to do it. So they set forth during the Revolutionary, or excuse me, the Civil War, and it's what really ushered in the Gilded Age in America, which rapid development, economic development, created a national market to be able to mass produce and get those goods to and from America. It stimulated immigration, urbanization. Our cities started to grow because they were able to put plants in place that were able to mass produce, drive down the cost of the products that they were producing. And it took America from sort of a middle class economic power to in 1894 as we were the top 3 economic power in the world, and largely due to the railroads, because they were absolutely vital to our growth. And they allowed for, as I said, national centralization operations that minimized or maximized efficiencies, that able to get those products around the country efficiently. And then, of course, in the early 1900s, Teddy Roosevelt, his idea, he was the force behind the Panama Canal, to be able to cut down the shipping time to get our goods from the East Coast to the West Coast, and of course from the West Coast to the East, and then out into the European markets and the Asian markets. So that helped us tremendously when it came to seafaring, and what we were able to put into the world economy, and eventually starting to grow into a global power. And then in the 50s, not Abraham Lincoln, another great American, Dwight Eisenhower, with his experience that he saw in Germany, about how the Germans had this road system. They could move their troops and equipment very fast and efficiently around the country to defend their nation, but also the economic stimulus that it provided for that economy. So as he came back and became president, he and those in Congress, a Republican Congress, for a couple of those years, pushed hard for the interstate highway system. And between 1956 and the late 70s, they built 90% of the interstate highway system that we know today. And when you look at that system, approximately 25% of the nation's productivity increases from 56 to 98 are attributable to that investment in the highway system. Again, being able to have the flexibility to move things around to smaller markets as well as the larger markets. And again, it expanded that domestic market for companies. In 1996, the interstate, with just 1% of the miles of public roads in the United States, carried 25% of the nation's surface passenger traffic and 45% of our motor freight transportation. So a tremendous increase in the ability for our economy to expand and move around. Just-in-time delivery, which in the 80s came to being, was really made possible by the interstate highway system. And those modes all working together efficiently to make sure that we could reduce our inventories at our plants and thus decrease the cost of those products that we were able to not only sell to consumers, but to get into the world economy. The importance of the system, I think it's made aware by the history I just talked about, but I think we all know in our everyday lives, it gets us to work, it gets our children to school, it gets us to visit families, it gets our products to and from the raw materials to the factory, and from the finished goods to the stores, and from the stores we are able to bring home food and put on our table and our refrigerators. So that system needs to be efficient. It needs to be efficient to keep those costs low, not only for us in our domestic market, but for us to be competitive in the world market. And I have an example of that as I've been going around the country and talking to the different stakeholders. I came across the soybean producers. And they gave me the numbers that we're the #1 soybean grower in the world. And our biggest competitor are the Brazilians. And the U.S. soybean grower can move a ton of soybean from Davenport, Iowa to Shanghai, China for $85. The Brazilians, on the other hand, from Davenport, Brazil, wherever that is they produce soybeans, to Shanghai, China, about the same distance, it takes them costs them $141 to move that. So we have a competitive advantage. And while we're sitting here looking at that competitive advantage, we need to understand that the Brazilians are investing $26 billion over the next several years in their water infrastructure. Also, the Chinese are investing into the Brazilian infrastructure because they want to have the soybeans in Brazil to be competitive with the U.S. so that they have a competitive market to drive the cost down for the Chinese. So while they're making those investments, we have to take note that every time they're making an investment, it drives the cost of that shipment down. So and over the past couple of years, we've seen it go from 141, it'll go down to 140, 138, and ours continues to escalate because of our aging infrastructure in the inland waterway system and our ports. The investments haven't been made. We've got our infrastructure is on average, locks and dams in this country, built for 50 years, our average age is 60 years. So we've got to take a close look at that. If we're going to continue to remain competitive in the world economy, it's that transportation system it's part of the equation. In fact, it makes up about 10% of the cost of a product is the transportation system. And if it's less efficient, it grows to 11% or 12%. And if it's extremely efficient, we put efficiencies into it, we want to drive that cost down, again, to make those products competitive. As I start my tenure as the chairman of the committee, I looked very hard at Washington, D.C., and it's changed over the years, very much so. And it used to be a power game, now it's a finesse game. And one of the key skills you have to have, one of the key tools in your bag if you want to be an effective leader, is you have to be a good listener. You've got to go out and you've got to talk not only to the members of your committee, but of your conference and in Congress, but go out across the country, which I'm doing today. Spent some time in Oklahoma. Today I'm here in Little Rock, going to meet with the governor today, and want to get his ideas and what what Arkansas has done. And Arkansas has, just recently, the voters of Arkansas raised the sales tax dedicated to transportation. So I want to learn from the governor and from Tim and others across the state, how we were able to convince the Arkansas voters, the Arkansans? I was in Oklahoma yesterday. I called them Okies. It was easy. You Arkies here, right? Okay. Is that derogatory? Okay. I don't want to say anything derogatory. I come from Western Pennsylvania. We call ourselves a lot of derogatory things, but So again, it's really important to listen to people, to be able to collaborate and coordinate. And it's critical to building the consensus you need to pass legislation, big legislative packages, which transportation bill that a couple that I'll be talking about here shortly, we need to do. And it's about reaching across the aisle, because transportation is inherently nonpartisan. As Tim mentioned, I know every town I come to, they've got roads, bridges, some of them have waterways, they've got trains going, they've got airplanes, everybody's got cars, bikes. Transportation is something that's universal to us all. In fact, I look out today and everybody here utilized the transportation system today in this country. And in fact, I was at an event in Washington the other night, and a gentleman came up to me and he said he was in the pharmaceutical business, and he was a distributor of pharmaceuticals, and he had 60 trucks on the road. And we're talking about it. He stopped, and all of a sudden he said to me, you know what, I'm really in the transportation business. But we all are in the transportation business because we've got to get to and from where we're going. So it's something that's critical to all of us. And that's why, again, going across the country, coming to places like Arkansas, which has, I'm told, a state, not a big state, but you have the 12th most miles, highway miles in the country. That's a lot of miles for a state with about a little over 3 million people. And so your highway system is critical to you. And so we want to make sure that we're working together across the country, state delegations, Republicans, Democrats, industry, stakeholders, making sure that everybody has their say as we move these bills forward. As I said, when you look at, mention a couple of the modes here, I didn't realize that Little Rock had barge traffic. I looked out my window today and there's a barge coming up the river. I'll be darned. You guys care about waterways. You care about the airport. You care about the highways. You care about the rail. So one of the things that I've done that Tim mentioned is I formed a panel, a special panel, that's going to spend the next 6 months looking at freight transportation in this country. The way we're set up in committees, we have a railroad subcommittee, an aviation, a water subcommittee, and they really focus on those different modes in their lane. But I thought it was important to have a look across the modes. How do the ports and the rail intersect? What's good? What's bad? And then, of course, the highways with trucking, taking what the train brings to the yard, to separate it, to get it out to the country. And, of course, aviation, the inland waterways, the pipelines, all of them are important modes that they intersect. And I think that's important. And so that's one of the reasons I put Rick Crawford, because of your number of highway miles you have in this state, but also, as Rick let me know, you have one of the highest number of miles in the water system, whether it's the Arkansas River or the creeks and streams, floodplains, things like that. Our committee looks at all those types of issues, and so Rick's going to be on that panel. And as we move forward, their job will be to not legislate, but to make recommendations as to how we can improve how the modes connect and how we can improve movement of freight in this country. But from that, we have three big bills that we're working on. The first will be the Water Resources Development Act, which deals with the waterways, inland waterways, flooding, the ports and harbors of this country. And as I said earlier, we haven't made the investments we need into that mode. Our locks are aging. I was just up in the port of Catoosa in Oklahoma, or Tulsa, outside of Tulsa, and if that port, and there's about a 50-50 chance that one of the locks downriver will shut down, there's about $5 billion worth of commerce that goes in and out of that port, and it's going to have to go to rail or to trucks to get out of there. Some people would say, well, that's fine, but when you put it on a road car, it's more expensive than on the water. When you put it on a truck, it's even more expensive than on rail and on water. So it's going to elevate the costs. And so that if the grains coming out of the Midwest can't get down the river on the barges, the least expensive mode, that box of Cheerios that you're putting in your cupboard at home is going to cost you more money. So we've got to make sure we have a system, as I've been saying earlier, to focus on how we get the system as efficient as possible. Which mode at which time is the best delivery system, and that's what we'll be working on closely on the WRDA bill and focusing on reform. I know that many of you, if you've been involved with the Corps of Engineers, and Tim and I had this discussion coming out this morning, a lot of times the first thing they say is no, when they should be saying, let's figure this out. Let's figure this out, let's get it done. And as we travel around the country and hear these stories, there are major shipping companies in this country that are investing billions of dollars in ports just off the coast of the United States. For instance, Jamaica, Maersk, the giant seafaring shipper. They've invested $2 billion in the port of Jamaica because they know that the Jamaican government wants it done, so it got done in about half the time it would the United States. The government's committed to making sure they're doing their part, and it's close enough to the U.S. market that they can bring those big ships that'll be coming through the Panama Canal. They'll offload them in Kingston and put them on smaller ships and bring them into the ports of the United States. But every time somebody touches cargo, it costs money. So those not coming into the port of Houston or the port of Savannah or the port of Los Angeles is going to cost the American consumer more money for that product that they get. So again, we're going to be looking very, very closely on reforming the Corps and getting those projects done sooner. The next bill later this year we'll be dealing with is the passenger rail and safety, the Road Safety Act. Dealing with safety on our freights, which of course are very, very freight, but we want to continue to make sure that those systems are in place, that we can continue to move cargo safely, but also passenger rail. Focusing on passenger rail because there is a need in this country for passenger rail. Maybe not the national system that we see today, but certainly focusing on the corridors in this country that have high density of population. And when you look at the United States of America, we have 300 million people in this country. It took us 65 years to go from 200 million to 300 million, and that crossed that threshold in 2005. And in 2005, they said it's going to take 32 years to go from 300 million to 400 million people, and we're already 7 years into that. And you look at places like the Northeast Corridor, we cannot add another lane to I-95. It's impossible. So we've got to figure out how to improve passenger rail to get people onto trains going up that congested Northeast Corridor and around the country. Figure out those things. I think if you focus on those corridors that are the most congested, that are most highly densely populated, that organically rail will come back. Because the reason passenger rail was in decline in the 50s and the 60s was because of aviation travel and the interstate highway system. Americans got in their cars and Americans got in planes and flying across the country instead of taking a 2-day train ride. So, but with the growth of the population, with the congestion we see in 11 or 12 of these corridors around the country, I believe we've got to focus on passenger rail to make sure we reform it and make sure it's efficient and make sure it begins to start to pay for itself. May not ever pay fully for itself, but we need to not just rely on the government to just slap a check down. We've got to figure out ways those operations can be more profitable. And then finally, we'll look at MAP 21 reauthorization, which is the Highway Surface Transportation Bill, which we dealt with last year. I believe it was a historic bill because we did a significant amount of consolidation and eliminating departments. In fact, nearly 70 programs in the Department of Transportation were either consolidated or limited. We gave states more flexibility, the flexibility to be able to move forward quicker. And time is money. If you're able to reduce these big highway projects, which average about 14 to 15 years, if you can cut them in half, just the savings from inflation alone, you're going to save 7, 8, 10, 12% over that period of time. So a $600 million road job, all of a sudden you're saving 50, 60, 80 million dollars, and that goes a long way to helping states be able to fund other things as well as the federal government being able to do more with the limited resources. And finally, when it comes to MAP 21, trying to figure out how we fund it. And as I've said a number of times, I don't rule anything in, I don't rule anything out. I think we've got to consider everything that's on the table, all the tools available to us, what the American people will tolerate. I know here in Arkansas, the folks, as I said, voted for that 0.5% sales tax. They understood that if they want to have a good, efficient transportation system, they've got to make those investments in it. It's going to reduce their time in traffic. It's going to reduce the cost of products on the shelves, and it's going to make Arkansas a more competitive place to draw industry in, to create the jobs that folks want, the good-paying jobs that folks want. So again, that's going to be something we're going to be looking at very closely as we go down the road. New ideas, old ideas, anything that makes sense, we want to take a look at. As a former small business owner, I entered public service knowing full well the importance of the transportation system, an efficient transportation system, and the importance of making sure that our infrastructure is strong. I was an automobile dealer, so the cars that, of course, went onto the highways, but getting by there by truck and getting to the truck to get it from places where the trains dropped it off, we knew full well, and making sure that they came efficiently helped to keep our costs down. I want to have a positive impact when I came to Washington, and when I looked at what committees do I want to serve on, I looked at a couple of them. You know, Ways and Means is obviously a great committee that deals with extremely important issues. There happen to be 2 Pennsylvanians on Ways and Means, and I can count, and they're not going to put a third Pennsylvanian. I looked at the Appropriations Committee and had the same situation, 2 Pennsylvanians. So as I looked and I started to think about Congress again deeply and the Constitution, the 2 committees I serve on are Transportation and Armed Services, the 2 places that I believe that it's clear to me, those are the things that the founding, 2 of the most important things the Founding Fathers wanted us to focus on. So that's where I sit, and that's where I do a lot of my work. Again, traveling across the country, talking to Tim, talking to Rick, talking to your governor today, listening, coordinating, collaborating, making sure that when we move the next transportation bills through, that the public voice is heard. Again, talking to the stakeholders, the trucking companies, the rail companies, the people that ship, making sure the folks that care deeply about the environment, we talk to those folks to make sure that their voice is heard. But if America is going to remain competitive, we got to make sure that we have this transportation system that's second to none, that can move things around efficiently. And I think we have to be successful. In fact, we must be successful because I believe our economy, the prosperity of America depends on it. And if we want to continue to be not just the greatest country in the world, but the greatest country in the history of the world, we've got to make sure we're doing the right thing to keep commerce moving and keep creating jobs for the American people. So again, it's a great honor for me to be here today. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have time for questions. If you'll raise your hand, yes. Microphone will come right over here.
Okay, first of all, Congressman, thank you so much for coming. This has been enjoyable and enlightening. I have 2 quick questions. With the changing weather patterns, it looks like we're going to have flooding on the Mississippi River again. To what extent is weather going to be a more important consideration in transportation? And what is the current status of Interstate 69?
Well, obviously, weather is always a big contributor, positive and negative, to the transportation system. I know that I've seen that there may be problems on the Mississippi. Hopefully, the Corps has learned lessons from, I guess, 2 years ago when we had terrible flooding in the Midwest. And it's a difficult situation to try to balance how much you let down, how much you keep back for various other reasons. So weather always plays a big role. The Northeast Corridor, for instance, the weather plays a huge role in air transportation. When the weather's bad in the Northeast Corridor, it ripples effect all across the country. So we're always concerned about it. Unfortunately, the good Lord takes care of weather. We just get to deal with it. A second thing on Interstate 69. Now, I don't know which part of 69 you're talking about, because I've been on 69 in Indiana, I've been on 69 in Texas, and I haven't been on 69 in Arkansas. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what the status is. Okay, yeah. I don't know the specifics on I-69. I do know that that's a roadway that, again, stretches from Indiana all the way down to Texas. Indiana's building it. Texas wants to build more of it. And you look at a road like 69, and again, it goes through about several states. And once that road becomes interstate from tip to tip, all of a sudden the economic development that occurs along that roadway becomes significant. So it's one of the things that specifically I'm not sure of, but I know that in the next transportation bill we want to pay close attention to roadways like 69 that folks are clamoring to complete, because we know the importance of it and the nation needs. Because as I said, I go back to that 400 million number. If it takes us 32 years to go to 400 million, it's probably going to take us another 15 or 20 years to go to 500 million. In this country, there's going to be congestion in this country in future generations that we need to deal with today, so that our children and our grandchildren aren't looking back and saying, you guys left us holding the bag here. Our economy can't grow because you've choked it because of the lack of investment.
If I could just mention on that, Mr. Chairman, I-69 is the one that Jay Dickey spent a lot of time working on.
That.
And for our purposes, it connects Memphis to Shreveport. And it does go through a lot. And Trent Lott and Dickey and a bunch of others were fighting on where it would go, but it does go through a lot of very rural, unpopulated part of South Arkansas in particular. As it crosses through, you can already see some signs that say "future home," you know, and you can just imagine what that's going to do to the economic development. But that's probably what she's talking about.
I have I look at similarly, I-81 goes through Pennsylvania. In the 1970s, Franklin County, Pennsylvania was a very agrarian county that sat between Harrisburg and Baltimore, Washington. There's about 70,000 people there. Over the last 30 years, because of I-81, Franklin County is now the largest county in my district. There's 150,000 people, and it's growing. It's one of the fastest growing counties in Pennsylvania. Unemployment rate's always one of the lowest, and it's because of that connection. And now the folks are there saying, hold on a second, we don't want too much development. They want to try to keep that rural feel of the county. But when you build roadways, you know, the people will come and bring jobs with them.
Jenny, you have a question right here.
Morning, sir. Jenna Rhodes, first-year Clinton School student. Thank you so much for being here. We've recently been learning about the triple bottom line.
The what?
Triple bottom line, the three-legged stool of sustainability, in terms of economic sustainability, social sustainability, and then also environmental sustainability. You've spoken to the economic sustainability portion of that equation. Obviously, I believe our country wants to be sustainable in terms of the polls that are coming out. So I was wondering if you would speak to how environmental sustainability and climate change and all these kind of things that are happening in our world are impacting your decisions about our transportation future.
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, obviously, we want to make sure that we keep our environment in good standing. And I think a lot of what we see today is when we're looking at alternative fuels, some of them I don't think in the short term, wind, solar, are viable. I come from Pennsylvania. We found a tremendous amount of natural gas, which burns much cleaner than coal and oil. I think we need to figure out a way to put the incentives out there for our major trucking fleets. They're all looking at it now. Some of them are starting to make the turn, but to transform themselves into natural gas or liquefied natural gas fleets. There's, again, a lot of interest out there, and it's very expensive. It's expensive for the trucking company to make the conversion, but it's even more expensive for the Flying J's and the truck stops owners to put in facilities to be able to fuel those vehicles. But there's a plan out there by a number of people. Boone Pickens has been working with Flying J and others to try to figure out how you put the infrastructure in place. It's kind of the chicken or the egg. So I think natural gas is a tremendous, not only for our environment, but for our domestic economy, jobs, and geopolitically, for us to say, we don't have to depend on the Middle East. We don't have to be so concerned about what goes on in some other parts of the world because of if something bad happens, it disrupts the energy supply. So I think from an environmental standpoint and all the host of other things, we've got to start making that transformation from oil to natural gas. And it's not going to happen overnight. We're not going to flip a switch. It's going to take a generation to do it, but we need to start today to do it.
Yes, ma'am.
That's the Pennsylvanian.
Yes, thank you very much.
Renovo, Pennsylvania.
Pleasure to have you here. Yes, I am a Pennsylvanian, a stump jumper from Clinton County. I have a question for you that is of recent concern, and that is the aviation industry, of which we are doing a reduction of 300 air traffic control locations. How do you suggest securing the safety of our flights in air if we are reducing by 300 the amount of air traffic control stations?
Well, let me start from the beginning. First of all, that air traffic has gone down over the last several years by 17%, while the number of controllers and folks that work at the FAA has gone up. So right from the beginning, we can look and say, we don't have the traffic, we have the traffic controllers, so there's probably some room in there. But when you go back to it, it is the FAA, I believe, my committee's been looking at this very closely, they have the ability, unlike some other branches of government, but the FAA has the ability in the Air Traffic Controller Organization to move funds around. They have a budget of $7.5 billion. They have the $2.7 billion doesn't deal with people, it deals with functions that I believe they can move money around. And, it's buying computers and paper clips and office supplies and contracts and travel and things like that. So they have a significant amount of money that they have, and they have the flexibility to move that around. The next thing you look at, there are 44,000 people that work for the FAA, and 15,000 of them are controllers. Now, it seems to me if you're going to furlough people, you first look back to the back office and to places that safety is not going to be affected. So you've got that to consider. The third thing is what they're doing is they're doing an across-the-board furlough. From the office people to the traffic controller, all looked at the same way, whether it's Chicago, O'Hare, or Atlanta, Hartsfield, two of our busiest airports in the country, versus Pittsburgh or Dayton, Ohio, or smaller airports. They're treating them all the same, which is wrong. So they have, I just laid out 3 or 4 things, they have the ability to do that. This administration does not want to do that. They want to inflict as much pain on the traveling public to make their point as we go through the summer, moving towards the debt ceiling debate. They want a very high visibility operation out there that Americans are going to feel, delays, and we believe they have the ability today to stop this. The airline industry has filed a suit in the federal court to put an injunction to stop them from doing that, because it's going to cause a lot of hardship across the economy. And this administration has the ability to have flexibility. And beyond that, tell me a company in this country over the last 4 or 5 years that hasn't had to cut 4, 5, 6, 8, 20% to keep their company floating, to keep their company in good shape. I was recently down in New Orleans, and the Democratic mayor in New Orleans told me over the last couple of years they cut their budget 26%. And he said, we didn't have to take much out of the muscle. What we took it out of was things that were reformed, waste, things weren't working. So I believe this is a time for the FAA to roll up their sleeves, this administration, to figure out how you perform, how you better operate these government entities. And I believe there's plenty of money there to be saved.
Yes, ma'am, you have a question, and the microphone's coming to you.
Yes, Dorothy Cox with the Trucker newspaper.
What paper?
The Trucker newspaper,
Okay.
national newspaper. The American Trucking Associations has said that truckers will be willing to bite the bullet and go for a fuel tax because it's so important to them. Sure. And you said you were going to talk to Governor Beebe about, the question of taxes. Is a fuel tax a real possibility? And my number 2 question is, are you working in the area of public-private partnerships? Where do you stand on that?
Well, I think that we're having this discussion with the American people, with members of Congress. I don't believe that raising, for the truckers, for instance, raising their tax, the user fee they pay, a standalone bill. I think if you're going to do tax reform, major tax reform bill, there may be opportunities there to look at different revenues. If you're making the tax code easier, making it, going from the numerous different rates we have now down to 2, which we're talking about, taking away some of the exemptions or loopholes. I think there'll be an opportunity to look at those types of revenue enhancers. But right now, again, without the package of a major tax reform bill, I don't think it's possible. And I know the truckers have said that. The manufacturers have said they'll pay more in fees because they know it's important to get their products to market efficiently. The Chamber of Commerce has been a huge advocate for figuring out ways to generate funding. But public-private partnerships are part of that equation. We increased TIFIA, which is a government loan, backed loans to states to be able to leverage their investment. And there's a lot of interest from not only here in this country, but around the world, private sector companies being able to get involved in transportation infrastructure improvements. We've got places and ports on this, and that's one of the things we're looking at for reform with the Corps of Engineers. There's a lot of private money, companies that want to dredge and deepen ports in this country because they want to build major facilities, one of them being with the natural gas industry to ship overseas liquefied natural gas. In Texas alone, there's probably about $30 billion worth of investment, much of it sitting on the sidelines waiting for the Corps of Engineers to sign off to do it. So there is tremendous interest in there from the private sector to make those investments to improve our infrastructure.
Harvey Joe, you got a question?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Harvey Joe Sanner. I live in Prairie County, Arkansas, and thank you for being here today. I can cut my remarks short by asking you to rely on Miss Amy Larson at the National Waterways Conference, who testifies before your committee often. She's got a real handle on what we need as far as waterway infrastructure in this country, I think, and she's very supportive of the 12-foot channel that Chris and others are. Personally, my question is, it seems to me before we can accomplish a lot in the area that you're very concerned about, or any area in Arkansas, we've got to have a different attitude in Washington about earmarks. And I would ask that you would comment on what you think about that subject of earmarks, how we're going to change the attitude and get the authority invested back in Congress that they once had to fund these kind of projects that we all need. If you would you please tell us what your thoughts are about earmarks?
First, let me say that earmarks, there were abuses in the past, there's no doubt. They were overdone in the past, but as we move forward with the Water Resources Development Act, and Amy Larson, who he speaks about, is head of one of the associations down there, we talk about how do you do a Water Resources Development Act. For those folks that aren't familiar with it, the Water Resources, the WRDA bill, it's line after line, Congress authorizing the Corps of Engineers to dredge a port, do a study on dredging a port, rebuilding a lock and dam, reassessing a floodplain situation. So inherently, it's considered an earmark because Congress names it line after line. Last WRDA bill in 2007, there were over 200 pages. And it's probably way too many. Some of the things that are on there are never going to see the light of day. But really the thing that's a challenge, it's a hurdle, is to try to do a WRDA bill to authorize those projects and retain constitutional congressional authority to do that. Now, we can do it in such a manner that we'll say to Congress, we'll say to the executive branch, we'll give you the power to authorize these and decide which is going to be or not be. And when we do that, we will effectively give away our constitutional congressional authority to do those things. We'll give it to the executive branch, and we'll never get it back. And we'll never get it back. I don't care if it's a Republican president or Democrat president. I'm not willing to cede one more inch of congressional authority to the executive branch. And we've done it since Andrew Jackson was president. There's been an assault by the executive branch on the legislative branch. And most of the time during national crisis, or even not national crisis, Congress willingly cedes that power to the executive branch. And so what you have now are this alphabet soup of agencies in Washington, from the Federal Railroad Administration to the EPA to the Corps of Engineers. They can put rules and regulations in place without having to come back to Congress to do it. And those are the kinds of things that, I watch a lot of my colleagues stand up and rail against. Well, that's something I don't want to be part of. I want to figure out a way we can do it with transparency, accountability, in the light of day, that anybody can take a look and see that, hey, improving navigation on the Arkansas River is going to be beneficial to the United States. And again, Tim and I were just talking about, if you dredge this from 9 feet to 12 feet, you dredge any river from 9 feet to 12 feet, you'll increase the capacity on that river by 30%. If we can get 30% more on the waterways, the cheapest and most inexpensive mode of transportation, it'll take about 130, a barge will take 130 trucks off the road, it'll take 16 rail cars off the rail. We're talking about a significant amount of commerce moving up and down these rivers, driving down the cost of whether those commodities or those products get into your house, or whether it's going into the world economy. So again, it's a challenge, and we're working through the process to try to figure out if we can do that. But like I said, I'm not willing to yield an inch.
I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
In the Arkansas River thing, and it's interesting because, in Arkansas, it's known as the McClellan-Kerr navigations. In Oklahoma, it's the Kerr-McClellan. So when
I
you
guess that was an Oklahoma.
Well, they were
They
were 1-2 on they were 1-2 on Senate appropriations, and so that.
Skip, that's why I just said the Arkansas River.
That's right. Well,
I didn't want to get in trouble.
it's fine. It's just fun when you cross when you cross the border. It's perfectly fine. But my question is, and I respect the comments on you know, making the river deeper, and I respect the comments on but it seems to me that has Congress or have people looked at something, particularly in urban congested areas, that compared to some of these programs, far less expensive, about working with the states and local governments to make cities more pedestrian and bike friendly. It would seem to me that that would be a great investment, not only in terms of transportation and environment, but also in public health. Right. Is there a way that you and the chairman of the Health and the Environmental Committees could, with Congressman Griffin's support, look at some possible, it seems to me that would be a good thing to look at.
Right. Well, it's already been in there. There's been a pot of money that's been earmarked for, I shouldn't say earmarked, but designated towards.
It's okay. I'm not against earmarks, so that's okay.
It technically wasn't an earmark. It was designated.
It's okay. I'm all right with it.
And my view of those things are really locally driven. They should be locally driven. It shouldn't be for. And my state's a perfect example. We took out in the last map 21 the wording in there that forced the state of Pennsylvania to spend money on bike paths, because we've got 5,000 bridges, and they're not all big bridges. A lot of them are small bridges that need to be rebuilt, we need to be repaired. And so I just think it's wrong for me sitting in the federal legislature to say, oh, by the way, you're going to spend some of that money on bike paths. But what we did give the governor of Pennsylvania and the state legislature the ability to say, yes, we will spend, or no, we've got real problems over here on bridges and we've got to focus on them. So I just believe that's something that, you know, if New York City and Philadelphia and Little Rock want to enhance bike path, then I think they should do it. And I'm not, and over my years in Congress, I've got earmarks for bike paths, because I think it's a wonderful thing. It's wonderful for the economy. It's wonderful for citizens to be able to get on bikes and improve their health. But again, for me, sitting at the federal level, I just don't believe that's our job to say to Little Rock or Arkansas, you will do this or you will spend money. But again, it's not that I'm opposed, I'm just opposed to the federal government.
Let me just say that I have meet with Mayor Stodela, talk with Mayor Stodela about bikes a lot. I am helping, hopefully I'm helping, not hurting, on a project here locally. I won't go into the details because that may not happen. But I had lunch with him at Browning's about a month ago on a Sunday to talk about bike paths. So there are some open, obvious ways to help in things with things like this, such as fund it from the federal government, but there are also ways that I can help without getting more funding from the federal government that in this particular case hopefully is going to bring some results. So just because you're not reading on it, reading in the Democrat Gazette that things are going on doesn't mean things aren't going on. And there's a lot of things I don't read in the Democrat Gazette that I'd like to see there. But so it's something I'm working with the mayor on, and I haven't talked to the new mayor in North Little Rock about this particular deal, but it is something I'm working on.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I know there's a lot of other questions, so I encourage you to come visit. We really appreciate you being here.